my name is Simon Sanborn, and welcome to the Count to 10 podcast. I started this podcast because I'm really focusing on how to help people understand behaviors and communication between each other as human beings. And I am a teacher and a behavior-focused teacher, but I do focus a lot on communication and how we're understanding behaviors because they are a communication to us. There's a function behind those behaviors. So that's kind of my main focus of this podcast, is kind of give people some background, some insight. So today I'm going to really focus on that communication piece when it comes to working with students with behaviors in particular, or dealing with behaviors even at home. The communication part of that, which is how we redirect or how we try to better a situation or help a child understand themselves better and kind of what's happening. It really depends on how we are asking those questions and how we are approaching that subject. So I talk to a lot with my associates. We're always kind of trying to be really vigilant with how we are addressing students. So, our job is here to support them for sure. But on top of that, we have to be aware on, minute to minute sometimes on a daily basis of how we are communicating, because how we communicate really has an effect on behavior. So, the beauty of communication is that it just opens up so many doors, to gather information and understand more things. So if I am seeing a behavior from a student or one of my kids at home, me knowing that there's something going on inside of them and something is happening, and that I need to find out what that is in order to help them process through this and get that kind of understanding with that emotional regulation that they need to have inside of them, that really matters, right? And if I really want to know and understand what's going on behind that behavior, I have to approach it the right way. And I mean the right way I don't like, right and wrong and good and bad. But when it comes to communication, I feel that there are ways of communicating that are better than others. Not that, and I'll say this, I'm not perfect at this. Days can get long at school, working in a behavior-focused classroom, and days can get long at home with our kids too. So I'm not perfect at this by any means, but I'm always just trying to think of it and try to have it in the forefront of my mind when I'm interacting with people, anybody for that matter, how I'm coming across, and then if I am dealing with a behavior student or behaviors from my kids, then I want to make sure that I'm figuring out what's going on and what's behind some of that. So again, conversations really matter with how we approach them. So it kind of goes back to that kind, thoughtful, open, and understanding way of speaking to someone. And I think that we can all, as adults, understand that as well. If an adult is frustrated with me and they scream and yell at me, I'll just go back to my football days. Coaches that, grab me by the helmet and scream and yell in my face, often didn't work. I was in kind of like fight or flight mode and kind of freaked out and didn't learn very well that way. Now, if a coach came over and grabbed my helmet and put face to face with me and said, I need you to do A, B, and C, or I need you to be aware of this, or I need you to hit this gap at this time. I need you to be thoughtful about this, and this is how you do it. That obviously had a bigger impact on me. So how we talk really, really matters. And some people might think, it's football or whatever, or by me saying, oh, that's football, it's kind of an excuse, right? I can say, oh, well, it's a behavior kid, so of course they're going to act like that. Ugh, that's not good. Or, oh, this is how the kid acts when he's at home and doesn't get what he wants. Great. Again, it's almost like I think of it as an excuse. I don't know if that's fair or not, but in my mind, I think of it as an excuse that if I am trying to teach somebody something, no matter who it is, an adult or a child, I have to come across as somebody who's wanting to teach, willing to teach, wanting to understand, so that I'm not only gaining that for myself, I'm modeling that, especially for a child, on how to react to certain things. Part of that is that it is difficult not to have our reactions, right? We all have this lower part of our brain that reacts for a reason, a biological reason, to keep us safe. So it can be difficult at times when you're dealing with somebody who is expressing these really, loud, high volume, angry kind of, communication on their end, right? That behavior that's being expressed is kind of over the top. It does. That's why we have the reactions we do. That's why we do react sometimes the way we don't want to, because we are reacting inside. So it's always kind of being aware of how your triggers are, and I use that term trigger specifically in this situation because there are people, myself included, that when I hear somebody screaming and yelling, especially an adult, I will react internally of like, whoa, what's going on? Am I okay? Am I safe? What's happening here? So knowing that, I have that trigger that happens, right? And what I meant by being, kind of intentional with that word trigger is that I think the word trigger is thrown around a lot. Oh, don't say that word to me. You're triggering me. Little things like that. Not that that word can't be important, but when it's kind of become a flippant term in our society, it takes away from the real triggers that people really do have that really set them back at times because they can't focus, they can't react like they want to, they can't behave how they want to because they really are having an internal trigger that's throwing them off. So this flippant use, it's like from people like, are busy cleaning the house and they go, oh no, my OCD is kicking in again. OCD is a really serious diagnosis and a pretty serious thing to try to deal with on a day-to-day basis as a person. So just throwing that term around, I think we need to be more careful with some of these terms. They really are specific and they really are tough to deal with. Because if you have a trigger where every time you hear somebody scream and yell, you go into complete fight or flight mode, that's a real trigger, right? Whereas if I say a word to somebody that they don't like and they say, hey man, you're triggering me, stop that. Again, that's kind of my example, okay? So it's important to me that these words are really specific. But I'll go back to when we have that moment of a kid screaming at us, we are having a trigger inside of us going like, oh my God, what's going on? Why is this happening? What's wrong? That's a normal response. But we have to be aware of it. So I talk to my associates and myself, talk a lot about these things, about how we're reacting, how we're feeling. And I'll say things like, hey, listen, I'm really stressed right now. We have a lot of things happening, a lot of things going on, as most classrooms do. I want to make sure that I am aware of how I'm speaking to students. How am I communicating? So if you hear me be a little owly, you hear me be a little stern, let me know. Ask me if things are cool or is everything all right. And I do that for them as well. And I say those things because I am really doing it for myself as well, right? I'm saying to them, I know that I am under stress right now. I know things are busy and we have a lot of moving pieces happening. So what can I do to make sure I'm being vigilant and I can use your help? And then I'm going to help them as well, right? Because it's a room full of human beings trying to teach and help a larger group of human beings. So the more we can be on the same page together, the better off we're going to be. And I think that's one of the reasons why our program is successful is because we are working on those things all the time to try to make sure we're talking to kids the right way. And instead of saying things like, "Hey, put your hood down. You're in school," right? We're saying things like, "Hey, Tommy, I see you have your hood up. Hey, man, I'm really sorry. It's a school rule. I need you to put your hood down." Or it could just be simply, "Hey, Tommy, remember you're in school. Make sure you put your hood down. Thanks, man. Good to see you." So again, there are some rules of thought that say that it's okay to be stern and it's okay to hold somebody accountable. And I guess there is a place for it, but I still think you can be nice. One of my favorite movies is Roadhouse. And it drives my family crazy, but I love it. And it's just a trashy, terrible 80s movie. But there's a scene in there with Patrick Swayze where he says that he's a bouncer in a bar, and he says, be nice. If somebody's being, if you have somebody who's drunk and giving you a hard time, talk to them and ask them what's going on or ask them to leave. Do it nice. If somebody is being inappropriate or doing things that they shouldn't be doing, ask them to leave. Do it nice. So I honestly just kind of popped in my head just now. So that's not the way I actively think about Roadhouse. But that makes me think of that like you can do all of these things and do it in a nice way. And if you approach things in a nice way, you are going to have less behaviors for the most part. Okay, I can't say all the time. You are going to see less behaviors from any human being, an adult or a child, if you're approaching things in a thoughtful and nice way. And along with that is kind of like the language we use nowadays. I can be a pretty sarcastic person in the right company, but I absolutely don't do sarcasm with my students. Often they don't get it. Often it comes across as being kind of like snide or snippy, and it does not work very well, especially with behavior-focused students. It doesn't work very well. And at the same time, remember, we're modeling these things, right? So if I am talking to them in a certain way, chances are they're going to talk to me in a certain way. Maybe if somebody's not, somebody is escalated, they might not. But for the most part, I'm kind of modeling that for them, as well. So I really need to be conscious of how I'm doing, if I'm being sarcastic or not, because I don't know about you, but I don't want a bunch of really sarcastic kids running around, right? So it's not the best way to communicate. Sarcasm has its place, don't get me wrong, but if we don't want it in our classrooms, if we don't want it in our houses, then we want to make sure that we're modeling that and kind of teaching that. And the last piece about this is really about vulnerability. Us being vulnerable with those around us, and I mean, obviously in the right way, in the sense of being an appropriate situation. But if I have a student who is coming in to do some of those wonderful state exams that we have to give, and they come in and you can already tell they're kind of on edge. It's not an enjoyable thing for anybody, I don't think, for most people. I'm sure there's some people out there who love taking tests, but it's really good for a kid or an adult or your child at home to see you be honest and open with them and vulnerable about, oh, hey, are you coming in to do your test? Yeah, I am, and I'm not good at this. I suck at this. Wow, it sounds like you're really stressed out. And it makes sense because tests sometimes aren't fun. I know I don't like tests. But you know what? Together, you and I will sit here, and anything you have questions about, anything that you have concerns about, let me know. I am here for you, right? And I'm with you that I don't like these things either, and I've had to take these as well. But we're gonna get through this together, right? So that vulnerability and that openness, if you have a child at home who's upset, I want to play my video games and I can't because we have A, B, and C happening. That's really frustrating. I can tell you're frustrated. I can understand why. I can tell you really want to play your game and we have a bunch of things to do tonight. You won't be able to. But, I know that's hard. And I remember playing video games when I was a kid, and I hated not getting my time that I had on that. So I can understand why you'd be upset. So calm tone, understanding, again, a little vulnerable. I've felt that way too. I understand what you're going through or what you're feeling. Again, that's just such a wonderful model for a kid, a wonderful model even for adults. I know adults who have said things to their kid or said things to other adults, and over time that modeling starts coming back, like interacting with a co-teacher or something, where they have started talking that way in this understanding, thoughtful way, and kind of working through problems together as a team, and they see that change with that modeling of being calm and cool. And there's a time for venting. Don't get me wrong, I vent sometimes too. Like I said in the beginning of this, is that I am not perfect at this by any means. This is something that I think about, I focus on, I try really, really hard to do it well, because it is for the people around me, right? It's for my wife, it's for my students, it's for my associates, it's for my principal, it's for my dad and my mom, it's for my brothers and sisters. How I communicate is really important to me, and I want to make sure that people see that modeling, because I want to give it. I want to give that model, not just for them. I want to give that model for myself. See, I can do this. I can keep calm in a hard situation. I can work through tough moments, and I can still stay calm, still stay understanding, still find my way through it. And to be honest, it's a much easier path, right? To have these explosive kind of feelings inside, to have these reactions or have reactionary kind of language. It's stressful. It's stressful, and it usually just delays what we're trying to get to anyways. So the more I can keep that calm center, the more understanding I can be for myself and for others, the better it is for me, not just them. right? So this really is a mutual thing that kind of is happening back and forth between people. And when it happens really well, and I'll tell you what, I've been a behavior teacher for 13 years now. I have seen some really incredible communication happening between my associates and their students, where no matter what the student is doing, explosive-wise, upset, angry, yelling, screaming, the associate is being thoughtful and caring and kind, and it just changes everything for everybody. And it's a really wonderful thing to see, because again, they're modeling this behavior for that student, right? And that student's also getting instruction on emotional regulation and understanding themselves better and the feelings we have inside. But that associate is modeling that for them. And I have some incredible associates who do that a lot, that no matter what's happening, they are calm, cool, collected, and they just handle everything as well as I could ever possibly hope for them to be able to do. So I'm very lucky for that. But again, that communication piece, you can see it change in your family too. The more calm you are, the more relaxed you are, the more understanding you are, even after a long day at work or whatever. That's wonderful modeling for your kids, and it shows them, it teaches them how to handle things when they go wrong. And what's something I say to my kids at home and my kids at school is that it'll always go wrong. Things will always go wrong. So you might as well plan your day knowing that, hey, the day is going to have some stumbles in it. And what am I going to do to get past them? What am I going to do to work through these problems? Because they're going to happen. And so if I'm assuming that things are going to happen, right? And I'm not saying the sky's falling every day or worrying about that too much, but I'm thinking of like, okay, I know I'm going to have some obstacles that I have to overcome. How am I going to do that? I might come and talk to Mr. Sanborn. I might go and talk to one of my associate. I might go feel comfortable enough to go talk to my teacher or a peer. I might feel comfortable enough, if you have kids at home, one brother might go talk to another brother and process through this in a way that's just really, really wonderful. Because that communication piece, as I talk a lot about on this podcast, that communication piece is so important, especially if you think of the divisions that we have in our society right now. I've talked about how much I hate social media. It's the worst case for this situation, right? It's the worst form of communication. And it's very easy for people to be very mean and unthoughtful and uncaring to each other, because it's just a few words that you can type into a screen and you have no responsibility really behind it or accountability behind it. So I really think it's a great thing to try to keep this communication opening, because I think it can heal some of the divides. And when I have conversations with friends of mine who might be on a different political side than I am, my hope is always that we leave each other with some understanding. We know we're not going to agree politically, so why not have some understanding? I don't have these kind of like crazy pie in the sky kind of dreams when it comes to communication, because we're all human beings and we are tribal, and we do kind of get ourselves, it's very comfortable and safe to be with a group of people that we agree with. Totally get it. I feel that same way. But we can still have conversations between groups. We can still have conversations between people in those groups. We can still decide that some language is okay and some words are okay, even though some people might not like them. We can still say that some people's decisions, political-wise, might not be the decisions I would make and that I don't feel are right, but I can still be understanding to that. I can't just say, well, you like that guy and he made this choice, so you're also as bad as them. That's just so unfair, right? I would hate for somebody to do that to me. That's what I always think of. I would hate it for somebody to do that to me, so I try really hard to not do that with others. Even when I watch something that might bother me on the news, might hear about something, might be part of a conversation that I don't agree with, I try really hard to be understanding, because I want to have that in return. That's kind of like why I have an issue with the cancel culture. We cannot stifle communication. And in America, with free speech being kind of the cornerstone to what we're about, we cannot be canceling people that we don't agree with. That's a power that is unfair for everybody. It's not just one-sided. So if we are going to, the hard part about that is that I will be silenced then, right? So if I'm saying what you say is wrong, and silence somebody or cancel somebody, it's what's to say it's not going to turn around and come back on me when somebody else is in a different position, right? So that's my struggle with it. And I know there are a lot of loud, gross voices out there in the world, but they have a right to have a voice. And people might not agree with that, but that's kind of where I stand. Even though I would wholeheartedly not agree with maybe some things they say, I feel they still have a space. It's kind of like the ACLU allowing Nazis to do a parade, right? Most people are not going to be involved with this and be excited about it and feel it's inappropriate. I feel that way of thinking is inappropriate, or that belief system. But they still have a right for a voice, even though I don't agree with anything that they talk about. So it's kind of a weird contradiction. It feels kind of icky as well, but I think that it's kind of like a foundational piece, and a big piece of the communication is the understanding. And I may not understand why somebody wants to be a Nazi or why they would want to follow Hitler's belief systems. I don't understand that. I can still be understanding to their right to say what they feel they need to say, and wholeheartedly not agree with it. So, all right. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking a moment to listen to this. I hope you get something from it. If you have any questions or concerns or comments or ideas, please email me at Simon Sanborn, Simon, SYMON, period, Sanborn, SANBORN @gmail.com. I'll field any questions I can. I'll answer any questions I can. I'll present ideas. I'll present perspectives as best I can for anybody who gets a hold of me. So, and I have got some feedback from people, so I really appreciate that. And like I said before, I think I said in the last podcast I've gotten some feedback of, your podcast makes me feel bad, or my podcast makes me feel like I'm not doing anything. I'm not taking your suggestions and doing something with them. And my only comment to that is, you don't have to do any of these things. It's just trying to give you a perspective. And that perspective, I hope, is that making small changes are a big deal. And so, if you're used to, a good example is not popping in my head, but a small step in the right direction is a wonderful thing. Even if it's just for a day or a moment you find it, then that's wonderful. The meditation app that I use says at the end of it, as you go into your day, find even a few seconds to stop and be mindful, as you get up from your desk or you open the door to your classroom. Stop for a second and just be present in that moment, and recognize some sounds around you, recognize maybe the trees outside blowing around in the snow, something. So it's not asking you to do crazy stuff all the time. It's saying just take a couple seconds to be mindful. So I would hope you would take the same things I talk about in this podcast the same way. I don't expect people to turn around tomorrow and make some of these huge changes. It takes a lifetime. I am only now getting here, and it's taken me a long time. So please take it all with a grain of salt, and it's coming from hopefully from a thoughtful and loving place. At least I hope that's how you take it. So thanks so much for your time. Have a wonderful night, morning, afternoon, weekend, Monday. And I'll see you soon. Adios.